Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. This is the English translation of the Majlis of Hazrath Maulana Qamar Uzzaman Saheb Damat Barakatuhum, which took place on Saturday after the Ishraaq Salat, Saturday the 21st of Muharram 1444, corresponding with the English date 20th of August 2022. Hazrat Wala is saying that I've been going through this kitab and I even want to write on it. It's a ilmi dini kitab. Abdullah ibn Mubarak was a very great personality. Maulana Habibur Rahman has translated this kitab. His father, the mention of his father is also here. The light in my eyes has become less now, Hazrat Wala is saying. Thereafter he goes on to say that in Tariq-e-Amiri it is mentioned that the father is Mubarak. His name is Mubarak. Abdullah is the son, we know that, Abdullah ibn Mubarak, so the father is Mubarak. He was a very saintly person. He was a slave and his owner tasked him to see and look after the orchards. On one occasion, the owner asks him, "Can you bring for me a butter or a sour pomegranate?" Nevertheless, he brings that fruit. He presents it to the owner. The owner eats from it and it turns out to be sweet. And then he asks him, "But how? How come? What did I ask you for?" To which he answers, how would I know?" The owner was surprised. And he says, "How would I know? That person would know who has tasted from this garden. Up to today, I have not tasted anything from this garden. You have tasked me to work in the fields and in the orchards. You have given me that permission to do that. You haven't given me the permission to taste or eat from these fruits." So what khidmat you have put in front of me, that is what I am doing and what I am carrying out. Now this was his religiousness, his sincerity, his honesty. The master becomes so pleased and he removes from his shoulders the duty of working in the orchards, and he says to him that from now you should sit in my majlis, and he tasks the duty of seeing to the orchards to another person. One day, Malik, the owner or the master, comes into his gathering speaking about getting his daughter married, and he asks some advice from Mubarak. So Mubarak, the servant, the one who used to work in the fields, he answers by saying that in the days of Jahiliyat, the Arab used to get their daughters married to that person who had honor and status, high family lineage in society. Hasab and Nasab. The Yahud would focus on that of wealth. If someone had wealth, they would give their daughter to that person. The Nasara would get their daughters married to somebody who had beauty and looks. And then he comes on to the fourth category, saying that in Islam, the consideration was given to that of deen. So I put and I presented these four in front of you. Now you may go on and then choose. Nevertheless, the owner then goes home and he is so taken aback with the profound answer of Malik. He goes on to say to his wife that I actually want to wed my daughter to Malik, even though he was a slave. However, he was the leader when it came to that of piety. And according to him, it was also that of taqwa. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. On one occasion, I think it was Maulana Abdul Majid, the Alahbadi, who said to Hazrat Tanvi that Allah Ta'ala is saying, Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. But what is our condition today? Allah Ta'ala is saying that the most honorable in the sight of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is the most pious. But that is not according to us. We don't work on those rules. How? Meaning, in amazement, Allah is saying that, but where are we from that? Nevertheless, the owner then weds his daughter to Mubarak. And it is from that union that Abdullah ibn Mubarak was born. Now, it is obvious that he was married to the daughter of such a wealthy person. And then what happens? That type of wealth then all comes down to him, meaning to the daughter, and then comes down to him all that inheritance. So Abdullah ibn Mubarak was born in 118 Hijri. He would go and travel in the Islamic countries. He used to make gasht. Sometimes he would go for tijarat and business, commerce, trade. And on other occasions, he would travel for the sake of Hajj. Imam Malik, Sufyan ibn Uyayna, Asim Ahwal, Sulaiman al-Taymi, all of them were his students. Sufyan al-Thawri was his ustad, but then too he would say that I make so much of an effort. In fact, the entire year he had been making effort so that he could come onto the level of Ibn Mubarak, onto his abstinence, onto his taqwa. Sometimes he would say, if only my entire life could be equal to 3 days of the life of Abdullah ibn Mubarak, who in actual fact was his student. Jahmi, who was from amongst the mashayikh of hadith, he used to say that my sanad reaches to his sanad by means of 6 links, and my sanad is very, very high. My chain of narrators, sanad. One Buzruk says that khayru ahli zamanina ibnul Mubarak, the best from the people of our age and day is Ibnul Mubarak. Thumma Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Thereafter Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Now look at that. He says first was Abdullah ibn Mubarak, then Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. On one occasion, so many of the saintly people of that time gathered. But from all of them, the person who surpassed one and all in jurisprudence, fiqh, in zuhd, abstinence, in adab and respect, in lughat and in language, in fasahat and eloquence, in staying up at night, shab bedari, in tahajjud, in staying far away from useless talks. It was none other than Abdullah ibn Mubarak. He was the one who was the leader in all these qualities, and therefore he surpassed all his contemporaries. He was the one who enjoyed most or made the greatest effort in setting in the companionship of saintly people. He had 4,000 shuyukh and elders which he took hadith from. However, he only narrated hadith from 1,000 of them. Ali ibn Hassan al-Shakif says that it was after the Isha Salat on one cold winter's night, that I met Abdullah ibn Mubarak at the door of the masjid. I mentioned a hadith to him, and in answer to that, we made mourning. There at the door of the masjid, in answer to that hadith that I quoted to him, he spoke and he made kalam until it was morning. Allahu Akbar. Fuzail ibn Ayaz says that equal to Abdullah ibn Mubarak, I don't see any other person. Now, specifically and intentionally, I spoke today, Hazrat Wala is saying, of Abdullah ibn Mubarak. You people make dua that Allah Ta'ala also makes this din, this day Mubarak. I'm going to be traveling, also making safar. People would call out to him by saying, "Oh, the alim of the East, relate hadith to us." One day, he entered into the city, and Harun al-Rashid, who was the king of that time, was also present there. There was such a racket and such a hustle and bustle and so much of activity, commotion, noise, etc. in the city center. People started fleeing all in the direction and making their way to Abdullah ibn Mubarak so that they could make ziyarat and look at him. The wife of the king, Harun al-Rashid, came onto her balcony and she started asking, what is happening? What is this commotion, etc.? And then people answered to her by saying, a great alim from Khurasan has made his arrival in the city. Abdullah ibn Mubarak is his name. People are all going to make his ziyarat and to set their eyes on him, going to sit with him and listen to his talks. She began to say that if there has to be a king, then kingship belongs to him. He's supposed to rule, not Harun al-Rashid. People like him, Harun al-Rashid, who get people together because of their weapons and their swords. Allahu Akbar. On one occasion, the father of Abdullah, meaning Mubarak, gives his son Abdullah 50,000 dirhams, and he says to him, go and carry out tijarat, go and do business. Nevertheless, he spends all that amount of money in the knowledge of hadith. Nevertheless, some time passes and the father asks the son, what have you done with all that money? He comes along and he puts all these registers in front of his father, all these books in which he collected and wrote hadith and knowledge in. He brought all these kitabs and he put it in front. And he says, this is what I have done for my dunya and for my akhirat. Now these are our Buzurgan-e-Din. This is the amount of qadr that they made for ilm and knowledge. Ibn Jawzi, it is regarding him, I think, that he would in his, meaning writing, ilm, knowledge, etc., for his pens, he would sharpen those pens, with the knife, and the sharpens itself was kept aside. And he even made that wasiyah that, listen, when I pass away, the water that is used to make ghusl of my body, I want you to warm that water with those sharpens, meaning itself, it is sacred because it was all in the cause of knowledge and ilm. The father became so happy when he hears what his son done with the 50,000 dinars. He goes into the house and he brings along another 3,000 and he says, oh my son, take this here and increase this trade that you are doing, meaning where you spent the money that I've given you earlier, the 50,000, take this is another 3,000 as well. Allahu Akbar. In fact, his condition, Abdullah ibn Mubarak, was not that initially. Rather, his time was spent in luxurious food and drink, only eating, drinking, and lahw al-ib, play and amusement, so much as wine drinking also. He had a chung, which was a musical instrument, a harp, and he was playing it, but there was no sound coming out. He then sat and started trying to repair its strings, and after doing so, he tries again. Now, even in that, he had much expertise. Now, this was his early life initially. But at that time also it doesn't work. After repairing it, and a sound comes out from that harp. What was that sound? Alam ya'nini alladhina amanu an takhsha'a qulubuhum li dhikrillah. Has the time not come for the believing people that their hearts humble themselves in front of Allah, submit before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? You know, in the incident of Fuzail ibn Ayaz, there was a person who recited this ayat. And one of the reasons for quoting from here as well is that we do not know about much of this, where on this occasion that ayat had come from that musical instrument, from that harp. At that time there, when he was busy with all of that, that's the ayat that had come. He was alerted. That was his time of tawbah. He took that and he smashed it and he broke it, that harp. And he let the wine that he had with him flow. He threw them out from their containers and their bottles. The silk clothing that he had, he tore them apart. And he spent then all his time, he occupied himself in the seeking of knowledge. And he reached his original place where he had to be. His genuine mudda'a, his genuine path and place where he's supposed to be. And this all of it also, we can attribute it to the effects of his father. Initially, Abdullah ibn Mubarak got his jurisprudence and knowledge of fiqh from Imam Abu Hanifa. Thereafter, after his demise, he went to Imam Malik, where he completed and made takmil of his studies. Towards the end, he would spend 1 year in the tijarat and in business, commerce, and 1 year in Hajj. He would say that for a seeker of knowledge, his intention and niyat should be correct. He should listen closely and attentively to the words of his teacher. He should ponder, and his ustad, he should ponder over those words. He should contain them and look after them, and thereafter he should spread them and should not become deceived. Hazrat Maulana Shah Wasiullah Sahab, Hazrat Wala is saying, he used to relate to us abundantly the incident of Sayyidina Abdul Qadir Jilani, that on one day he came to the madrasa. It was a Friday as well, and he starts speaking about the incident of and relating the incident of Abdullah ibn Mubarak. He says that a beggar comes to him and his slave girl was there, and he says to her, whatever there is, give it away. Nevertheless, she does that and she gives away, and it was 9 eggs that she gave away. They make evening, and a person comes with a basket, and Abdullah ibn Mubarak then looks inside. It turns out to be eggs, and then he starts counting them, and he finds and he counts 90 eggs. He summons the slave girl, saying to her, how many eggs did you give away? She says, 9. And he asks, why? She says that I have kept one for the iftari. And he goes on to say to her that you have harmed me by 10 eggs. Meaning, if you had given the 10 eggs instead of 9, I would have got 100 instead of 90. Now here what we're actually trying to tell you here is this was the yaqeen they had in the promises of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sayyidina Abdul Qadir Jilani rahimahullah ta'ala used to become so elated and go into a state of wajd and spiritual ecstasy when he used to quote this waqia, and similarly was the condition of Hazrat Maulana Shah Wasiullah Sahab, he would be completely and totally elated. So this was their dealings, this was their commerce and their trade with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that they knew at the basic minimum that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would give is that He would reward by 10. He would reward by 10. Now, if this is the case of that Zat and being, His door and His threshold, जिस चौखट का ये मामला होता है तो वहाँ कभी घाटा नहीं. When this is the condition of that threshold and that door, the divine door of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then there is no question of being deceived at that door. That was the yaqeen they had with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm honestly telling you, Hazrat Maulana Shah Wasiullah Sahab, the way he used to quote these incidents, speaking about these sifat of those pious Buzurgan-e-Deen and predecessors. In fact, you would even find it in his Malfuzat, in his Mawa'iz. So, the genuine, the original, the fundamental point here is Nisbat Ma'al Haqq. This grand connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rabb se ta'alluq. The great connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wa'da par yaqeen, firm conviction in the promises of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hazrat Wala is saying that I went to Mazahirul Ulum, and when I spoke there, I related to them the incident mentioned in Gulista, where a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala passes by the palace of a king when an announcement was being made that increased the stipend of certain person because wo mutarassid farman hai, wo chaukat ko pakde hue hai. He is always waiting for the command to be released by the king. He is always waiting, and he is always at the threshold and at the doorstep of the king, just waiting to serve him. When he heard this announcement, he let out a screeching sound, cheekh nikal gayi aur behosh gir gaye. He falls down unconscious. People came to him, Hazrat, what is this type of spiritual state that has overtaken you? He says, yes, I was just taken back. That this is the condition of the grand court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When I heard that announcement from the king's palace, I was taken to the grand court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because this is the same call that is made, the same announcement that is made from the grand court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So all of that came to me, came in front of me, that person who is always waiting for the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that person who is at the threshold, at the doorstep of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And these majalis is also for this reason. It is not only that we can listen to the statements of the pious predecessors, however, not only their aqwal, however, it is the ahwal, the spiritual condition and spiritual states as well. In fact, Hazrat Maulana Shah Wasiullah Sahab used to say this. He said it to me personally. Hazrat Wala is saying that the foundation of my path here that I am showing you to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is based on two things. One is tawazu and the other one is tawakkul. When you adopt tawazu and humility, then your relationship with fellow people would be then rectified. And when you adopt full trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would be corrected. So it is not just these words, rather let us go into the deep meanings and let us get the ruh and the spirit of all of this. And that is the nisbat and the ma'rifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ilahi maqsood man tu hi wa rizai tu muhabbat wa ma'rifat khud bideh. Oh Allah, my goal is you and your pleasure. Therefore, bless me with your love and your recognition. In fact, one very great sheikh used to say that if you go to the majlis and the gathering of any person and you do not find any decrease in your love for the dunya, then flee. Run away from that majlis because you're not sitting in the right place. When you go to this majalis, you're supposed to most definitely find a decrease in your love for the dunya. In essence, meaning your attention supposed to be turned to that of the akhirat. So we are all in this year together. So there's two things here. Nisbat ma'al haqq and shafqat al khalq. To have this strong connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to have mercy and compassion to the makhluk of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the essence of suluk and tasawwuf. All shukr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, my son-in-law, Fahim, he's a very saintly person. He's one who fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala much. He's always engaged in dua. Today we are also leaving and we are also going in that direction where they are. They are busy doing so many tests and this and that, but it turns out that every time they see his sugar turns out to be quite high. They're waiting for all of that to settle so that they can go on with that operation. Now make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes that operation successful. You know, he's very muttaqi, and even in his muamalat, in his transactions and his dealings and everything, he is absolutely clean, pure, transparent. He is paband with his namaz. In fact, he would get the water ready for his children at home, etc. I didn't even say this to them. No. In fact, he himself put his son into the alimiyat, and now his son is almost close to graduation, Nadwi Alim. So, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was asked regarding that which by means of people will gain entry into Jannah in abundance. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Taqwallah wa husnul khulq. The fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and good character. So look at that. On top we said, Nisbat ma'al haqq and shafqat ala al-khalq. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is saying, Taqwallah wa husnul khulq. Tariq badla nahi karti hai. So this path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not change. It will be the same, it will remain the same. Man ahdatha fi amrina hadha fahuwa raddun. People who come and change things here and there, innovations, do this, that and the other, it would most definitely be refuted and rejected. So, what is our maqsad? These people that we are speaking about, our pious predecessors, they rectified their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they made necessary upon themselves the door, the threshold of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Look at that bayan of Sayyidina Abdul Qadir Jilani relating the incident of Abdullah ibn Mubarak. What is our maqsad? What is our goal? Why have we come? وَمَا خَلَقَتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I have not created jinn or man except so that they can worship me. Today we have become so engrossed in our rosy that we have even forgotten about the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So make dua that Allah ta'ala makes this operation successful. And make dua that we return happily from this particular safar that we are undertaking now with good news. So even though I am going and with safar there is type of difficulty, etc., but Make dua that Allah Ta'ala makes this safar easy and makes arrangements for good treatment and make all of this successful. Allahumma inna nas'aluka al-afwa wal-afiyya fi ad-din wad-dunya wal-akhirah. Allahumma inna nas'aluka as-sihhata wal-'iffata wal-amanata wa husna al-khulq wal-ridha bil-qadr. Rabbana taqabbal minna innaka anta as-sami'u al-alim wa tub alayna innaka anta at-tawwab ar-rahim bi hurmati sayyidin nabiyyil kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.